If WWE doesn't see a future for you and you're not selling t-shirts, you get cut. WWE isn't handing out participation contracts anymore. Today we're diving into the IWC's favorite meltdown, WWE roster cuts. The internet is crying. The casuals aren't concerned, but we're going to break this down like adults because some of y'all forgot how businesses work. Stick around to the end of this video. I'm dropping the 4 categories that every WWE star falls into right now, and why, if you're not in one of them, you're one botch away from being kicked out the door. So let's take a second to talk. Every sport makes cuts. Football, basketball, baseball, nobody is immune to making cuts to a roster. And WWE is no different. When you look at the WWE roster, it's easily right now 200 deep across Monday Night Raw, Friday Night SmackDown, NXT, and whatever Evolve is. I'm not sure what that's going to become over time, but that still exists, and there are wrestlers that are on that roster. But if you look at the amount of TV time available, Monday Night Raw gives you about 2.5 hours of wrestling, okay? SmackDown is 3 hours right now, but reports are saying that in the next couple of months, they're slicing that thing down back to 2 hours. NXT is a cool 2 hours of wrestling once a week. On a good night, on any one of these given shows, on a good night, you could get 7 matches a show. At 7 matches a show, given some of these will be tag team matches, I understand, but I tend to lump the tag teams in as one person. Let's make this pretty for the sake of argument. There's about 14 people per episode of wrestling that are actually doing something meaningful, and I use that word extremely loosely when I say meaningful. That just means that there's some semblance of a story going on in why they're on television. And then let's be even more honest with ourselves, that number is more likely 10 people per episode have a legitimate, meaningful storyline. But even if we go with the number 10, that's like 30 people a week that are getting an actual WWE storyline between Raw, SmackDown, and NXT. So if you're not in that top 30, if your name is not in the top 30, which is basically the top 10 on each one of those shows, you're in the bubble. You are sitting on the danger zone, the bubble of the WWE roster. So let's look at these names that were released this past week, starting with Dakota Kai, Braun Strowman, Shayna Baszler, Kaden Carter, and Katana Chance. Those were your major main roster cuts. Then we look down further at NXT and we go Cora Jade, Gigi Dolan, Eddie Thorpe, Jakara Jackson, Riley Osborne, Oro Mensah, Javier Bernal, Joe Coffey, Mark Coffey, Wolfgang, Danny Palmer. I believe Shotzi is some kind of exclusion that's on the list because of contract terms. But that you get the bulk of the list is right there. So let's be real. Let's be realistic with ourselves. Dakota Kai could have an argument for being in the top 30. I'm not saying by any stretch of the means right now she is top 30, but she could make an argument and make a case for being in the top 30 ability-wise. Then I move on to like a Cora Jade, and I think you could argue that she has the potential to be in that top 30 spot. Everyone else that I just named on that list, as I went down the NXT and the main roster cuts, it's time to have a heart-to-heart. The IWC talks about WWE like it's supposed to be booked for the Reddit and the Twitter audience, but it's not. WWE is being booked for the casual wrestling fan. They make up 60 to 80% of the profit driving market. Listen when I say this, pay attention very closely because this is not made up statistics. 60 to 80% of the profit driving market. These are the people who pay the $4,000 for WrestleMania seats. These are the people who buy the t-shirts. These are the kids in elementary school who have parents with disposable income. I know that the IWC hates the relationship with reality. I know that the IWC hates to hear about this statistic because we're more passionate about what we watch, that we make up a bigger portion of the audience, but it's just not true. There are more people who actually really don't give a shit about the day-to-day of professional wrestling that are driving the market. That's the reality, right? And then you have the IWC, but what does this IWC know? The problem with the IWC is most of them still live at home with a mom, with an uncle, with an aunt in a basement. And unbeknownst to them, they don't understand that a world exists outside of Twitter and outside of Reddit, and that some people watch wrestling merely as a pastime. And unlike some other things in pop culture, the internet's opinions and the internet's metrics of professional wrestling are not indicative of the overall picture of the audience that watches professional wrestling. So I'm not going to be one of these other creators who are out here saying this is just business or you should follow these people to AEW if you care. I'm here to talk facts. I'm here to give the casual point of view. And the harsh reality is that once someone disappears from the WWE roster, they no longer exist in most casual fans' world. That's just an unfortunate reality. That is realistic. Ask Mercedes Moné. The paycheck may be better in AEW, but she did not carry over the number of fans that she had in WWE. So breaking down these main roster cuts is extremely simple. Everybody is overreacting to this, and the IWC completely just taking this out of, I've seen race arguments, I've seen arguments about politics, but the reality is if you just look at each name and you take a practical approach to looking at why they possibly were let go, it's rather simple. Start with Dakota Kai. Dakota Kai is 36 years old and she is still hanging around the mid card. We all argued for her to win the Intercontinental Championship against Lyra Valkyria, and Lyra Valkyria is like 28, 27 years old. And so when you look at this from a purely logistic standpoint, Lyra Valkyria has more value because she has more time and more opportunity to bloom into what ultimately they want is a main event caliber wrestler. So WWE sees the younger talent like Lyra Valkyria as a better asset, and when it comes to cutting numbers, they see somebody like Dakota Kai, who at 36 years old has tended to be a little bit injury prone. And if anybody knows about the human body, you don't become more durable the older you get. At 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, you start to feel the effects that life has taken on your body. So somebody injury prone at 35, 36, you have to bet on the trend that they're going to be injury prone at 37, at 38, at 39. It's just, that's the nature of the business. Could they be wrong? Sure. It's very possible that you could be wrong, but you have to make the informed bet. And for somebody like Dakota Kai, I really believe this is a blessing in disguise. Dakota Kai feels to me like somebody who can go to AEW and find an extreme amount of success. I think she can carry over. She has a pretty strong IWC fan base. She can carry that fan base over to AEW, and she will get more opportunities to shine. They are willing to take more of that risk on her because AEW isn't built around such a logistical booking standpoint. So that's pretty simple to explain with Dakota Kai. With Braun Strowman, I think I've seen the reports, and if the reports are anything close to true, he was just overpaid, and he's 41 years old. At 41, once again, we start talking about injury risk. A guy that size is going to be injury prone. Doesn't matter how great. Braun Strowman in the greatest shape of most WWE wrestlers, but the value doesn't match the cost. That's just the problem for Braun Strowman. You made too much money. They don't see the return on the money. They don't value you. They see you're 41 years old. They don't think there's a lot left to squeeze out of you. They just decide it's better to move on and invest that time into somebody younger, like a Jacob Fatu. So then you go Shayna Baszler, right? Shayna Baszler's pretty simple. She's, in my opinion, to say this in a very nice way, I think Shayna Baszler is just too legitimate for the women's division. She's a fighter, not an entertainer. And if you don't have more fighters to put her up against, it doesn't make sense to keep her around. Like the Ronda Rousey stuff was entertaining for a short period of time, but Shayna Baszler draws the immediate comparisons when you put her in the ring with like a Maxine Dupree. I talk about this with like AEW can't use real tall wrestlers because when you put a big tall wrestler in the ring with a bunch of little guys, they start to look little. When you put a Shayna Baszler in the ring with a Maxine Dupree, you immediately go, this isn't real anymore. This isn't, because Shayna Baszler would tear her apart. So I think, once again, Shayna Baszler, somebody who will benefit from the freedom of being able to go out and book fights against who she wants to fight against. Then you have Kaden Carter and Katana Chance, who, I said this back when I made a tier maker, they have no aura. They have no identity. They're undersized. They're forgettable. And the IWC lost their shit because these two are the type that the IWC loves. They look like the IWC. They're the same height as the IWC. The IWC doesn't really want identity. They don't want them to have character. And so the reality is everything that I said was true. Your whole entire gimmick cannot be the party girls who come out and use smoke cannons, and then when you get in the ring, it's just completely like the whole party gimmick goes away, and now you're wrestlers. Your gimmick has to carry from the backstage to the entrance to the in-ring stuff. There has to be a line, a through line that flows through to give you cohesiveness, and it just never was there with Kaden Carter and Katana Chance. I never really saw what the potential path was for them. I never, like, most of the time I can pinpoint, okay, if they do this, this, and this, they could get to a destination. With Kaden Carter and Katana Chance, they just really felt like a jobbing tag team for the women's division, a division that already is a little bit of a mess, and you don't want to be a messy gimmick in a messy tag team division. It just doesn't make sense. This gives them, once again, the opportunity. They can go find a new home if they want to go to TNA, AEW, if they want to book on the independent scene, revamp your characters, come back. Being cut is not the end. But you have to remember, WWE is prepping new names right now. And when you're prepping new names, you have to make room on the roster. We talked about 10 legitimate people on each brand that have the ability to be front and center. And now they're bringing up Julia. Now they're bringing up Roxanne. It looks like Stephanie Vaquer is on the fringe. They're testing her out. They're seeing how the audience likes her, and it seems the audience is responding. I think she'll be main roster sooner rather than later. And then on the men's side, you see Rusev, new shiny toy. You see Malachi Black, new shiny toy. We hear the rumblings of an Alberto Del Rio coming back. You have to make room for these new shiny toys. And I get it. Like the argument with like Rusev and the argument with Malachi Black and the argument that I'll probably talk about tomorrow with Alberto Del Rio is you cut these people for these other wrestlers. But the thing you know about an Alberto Del Rio, the thing you know about a Rusev, the thing you know about a Malachi Black is the same thing that Tony Khan unfortunately tries to do as the big feature of every show, and that is a surprise is worth more than somebody who is gone stale. So you can bring back a Rusev, and you know for at least 3 months there's going to be an intrigue in what happens with a Rusev. Same with a Malachi Black. You get this grace period with a Malachi Black of like 3 months that you can play with the booking to try to create a star. And the same thing with an Alberto Del Rio. They can bring him back. They can judge the pop. If people absolutely hate him, there's no harm, no foul. You just get rid of him. But the reality is you have to make room on the roster for some of these people. And if you want to go down, like, I don't want to take the time to actually go through each NXT person, because it's even easier to make the argument on the NXT roster is that you can argue all you want, IWC, that the NXT is not a developmental brand. A lot of people argue that NXT is a third brand of wrestling, but at the end of the day, NXT is still the developmental brand. TKO sees it that way, and TKO sees no future for 90% of the people who were on that NXT roster cut list. The reality is, this is the reality. You guys can call it the third brand of wrestling, but if you asked 75% of fans who are at a Monday Night Raw show, if you gave them pictures and showed them these names on this roster, they'd blink at you and they would not be able to ID most of the wrestlers' names that were on this list. You might get a few who could pull a Gigi Dolan. You'll probably get quite a few who can tell you what a Cora Jade looks like. Jakara Jackson's a long shot. I think Shotzi, because she was main roster, that's a cheat code. But the reality is, outside of that, most of those names on that list, casual fans are not. I could ask Lauren right now, and she'd have no clue who most of these people even are. She wouldn't even know they were associated with WWE. So let's talk the IWC hypocrisy now, because you know what happens next. This is the next step in the IWC outrage. The same people who trashed Shotzi when she was in storylines with Charlotte, the same people who on the internet have claimed Dakota Kai is just too injury prone and she's mid and she didn't deserve a title run, these will be the same people who begin to glaze these women the moment they sign with AEW. The immediate tweets will begin about how WWE misused Shotzi, how she could have been a star, how you hated the way WWE treated them, and now that they're with AEW, you see this like grand plan for them, and Tony Khan will use them. They will be a shiny new toy to Tony Khan, but unfortunately, it's just a way that the IWC weaponizes these things against WWE. They got to stop the cap on this, right? Gigi and Cora. Let's talk about Gigi and Cora because I think they're outliers in this group of names. Gigi Dolan is 27-year-old, right? Decent following based on some of her NXT stuff. But here's the problem. If WWE looked at Gigi Dolan, right? They sit down and they assess the roster and they look at Gigi Dolan and they go, there's nothing left for her on NXT. She's run her course. We have new people we'd like to get to. We have nothing left to do with her. They flirted with the idea of putting her in a tag team, but I think they know that division's in shambles. And so they look at Gigi and they go, all right, what can we do with her on the main roster? And the reality is they look at the main roster and they go, I don't see where we could put her. We're bringing up Julia. We're bringing up Roxanne. We're bringing up probably Stephanie Vaquer. There's no room for a Gigi Dolan right now. And so the reality is you're out. That's the place you don't want to be right now. Is you've done everything you can do in NXT and there's no plan for you on main roster. That is the formula right now for getting cut from WWE. So let's talk about a Cora Jade then, right? She ran her course on NXT just like Gigi Dolan. I think she's been a champion. She's done most of the things that you can do in NXT. And I think when they look at Cora Jade, they decide there's nowhere to reinsert her. She will just take up a spot on NXT. She'll get in the way of a Jada Parker. She'll get in the way of a Sol Ruka, of a Fallon Henley, of these new girls that they're trying to develop. And if we look forward, do you see Cora Jade outpacing a Roxanne Perez, a Julia, a Stephanie Vaquer, even a Jada Parker? You don't. So the unfortunate reality for a Cora Jade is, while I think she has all the intangibles to be successful, if they don't have a plan for you, the best thing they can do for you is let you go. Now, for Cora Jade, I think TNA is the ultimate move for her, right? All of the tools are in the toolbox. Just work your way back. Put that chip on your shoulder, develop your character, make them regret letting you go, and then you could turn around and you could come back to WWE when you've put all of it together. But the problem I have is all of these comments, all of the IWC turning on these wrestlers when they get released and pretending like they don't know what it's like when you lose your job, when you get fired from a company, to pretend that you don't have a bitter taste or a little bit of blood in your mouth, right? The IWC is turning on Cora Jade because she has spoke up about alleged body shaming in NXT. Let's not pretend like we don't believe, with the culture that is in wrestling, that somebody might have made some comments about Cora Jade's body. Let's not pretend like we don't believe that, right? And I don't even think that Cora Jade was really attacking WWE. I think Cora Jade's tweet was more of a clapback at Dave Meltzer and the lazy label he tried to put on some of the people who were released from the company. And she has every right in the world to defend herself. Dave just needs to shut the fuck up. That's the bigger problem, right? Is these guys like Dave Meltzer stop stop commenting on the personal aspects of this and just look at it from the lens of a professional wrestling fan. Dave Meltzer, you're not a CNN journalist. You're not digging. If 99% of the shit you say is bullshit and 1% of the time you get something right, you're not a journalist. You're just a guy who guesses a lot. It is their right as wrestlers to speak their opinions when they leave and deal with the consequences. Meltzer needs to stay in his lane. And then what's even worse than the people who comment on the actual things is you now have this new wave of fucking IWC nerds who go out of their way to Photoshop tweets of different people reacting to this situation. I've seen one floating around with CM Punk where he talks about Cora Jade, don't go to Tony Khan, and this and this and this and this. And you see all these other, like, just these quotes that are taken out and literally Photoshopped to look. It makes it so hard to decipher the internet wrestling news when you have these people who just are completely making up fabricated stories. I've been caught before reading one of these stories and quoting it and then going back and going, this does not exist anywhere other than this Facebook post that I saw. The fact that you opened up Photoshop and made up a quote that nobody said for a tweet that probably got 12 likes and 2 shares, that is questionable lifestyle choices. To me, you got to find better things to do with your time than to fixate on these situations. These people were released, let them go. Now, I think with the news breaking today, we got to talk about this Alberto Del Rio rumor, right? The IWC right now is losing their shit once again. Alberto Del Rio may be or may not be signed to WWE. Seeing conflicting reports, don't really care. We're going to speak about this like it's actually true. Okay? Does the guy have baggage? Yes, sure. Nobody is denying that. But since when did professional wrestling or WWE become this covenant of good? I mean, you have people who defend CM Punk, who is a kind of notorious asshole. Now, I know I'm not comparing apples to apples, but he can tend to be a lot of the shit that's coming out about the WWE fan access type event. There's some rumors coming out about that. You have people like Ric Flair who have been associated with the company. You have different people who are involved in WWE who all have history. And I'm not defending any of them. I'm just saying, if you're going to point to one, point to them all. Because the same people who were talking shit about Alberto Del Rio are the same people who are fantasy booking Brock Lesnar, Riddle, and even Vince McMahon back into WWE. You just gotta be consistent. If it's a morality contest, half of the roster gets pink slips. That's the unfortunate reality of professional wrestling. The most of them are not great people. The outrage is selective. WWE has a propensity to sign problematic people in pro wrestling. That's kind of the business. And if they work out, great. They become reformed. Who's to say Alberto Del Rio hasn't changed his way? Who's to say Alberto Del Rio is not still the biggest douchebag in the world? But we won't know until we know what we know. And it shouldn't affect his ability to get a job with WWE. That's just my opinion on that. But my final thoughts are, stop overreacting to these releases. They're not a tragedy. They're a part of the game. Triple H and Nick Khan told you guys during WrestleMania week, we're not benching anybody. And so if these are people who look like they were potentially on the bench, TKO is running things more like a professional sports team. If you are not a needle mover, if you are not a top 30 player, if you are a utility name on a team-friendly deal or a prospect they believe in, you're out. And if that sounds cold, that is what it is. If you don't move the needle, you're probably out. If you're not a top 30 player on Raw, SmackDown, or NXT, you're probably out. If you're not a utility name like an R-Truth who is on a team-friendly deal, you're probably out. And if you're not a prospect, let's say under the age of 30, that they don't see a immediate future with in NXT or immediate future moving you to the main roster, you're probably out. And if that, like I said, if that sounds cold, that just is what it is. Wrestling is not a charity. It is not a kids sports organization. It is a business, and WWE operates on a business logistic system. So let me know from this list who you think will bounce back, and let me know what your thoughts are on the IWC. I'll be watching. I'll pay attention to the comments. But for now, everybody stay casual. Let's talk about this.
Head down, we're ready to rumble. The casual pod don't stumble. No peace, no rest in this